and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. So Russian dictator Vladimir Putin refusing to agree to an immediate ceasefire with Ukraine in a 2-hour call yesterday with President Trump, who said afterward that Moscow and Kyiv would resume direct talks on an agreement to halt the fighting. He also suggested that the Vatican may be willing to play host to said talks.
Pope Leo XIV to the rescue. He wanted some peace talks to take place there. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if he can advance the flag of peace, so to speak, then sure. I mean, provide some moral clarity on the issue the way that John Paul II did. It's creative. For more on this and other geopolitical matters, Cliff May, president of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies and foreign affairs columnist for the Washington Times, joins us. Cliff, thanks for being with us. So,
Good to be with you.
Your takeaways from the Trump-Putin call.
Putin has not made any concessions whatsoever. He hasn't agreed to Trump's request, demand, call it what you will, for an immediate ceasefire so that negotiations can take place. President Trump has continued to threaten to put serious pressure on Putin, but he hasn't. If he threatened it in the phone call, we don't know about it. And as for the Pope getting involved, I'll remind you of a very old story. It said that when the Soviets went in and
yes.
Eastern, you know what I'm going to say?
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Took over Eastern Europe, Stalin was told that the Pope was very opposed to what he was doing in countries like Poland, making them into satellites. And Stalin said, the Pope, how many divisions does he have?
Right.
And by the way, and this may be just to put the hammer at the emphasis, Putin thinks no differently. He doesn't think, the Pope says, I care about that. Not for a minute. Anybody who thinks that doesn't understand that understands nothing about Vladimir Putin.
So understanding Putin then, the Putin whisperer here, Cliff May, then is he willing to do anything, do you think, or is he just trying to slow play this, wait until Trump directs his attention elsewhere and march on to Kyiv?
Yes, I think we know that he is preparing a new offensive. I think he feels that if it's possible for Trump to just walk away from the problem, and if that means not continuing to sell munitions to the Ukrainians, well, why would he? I mean, why would he want a ceasefire? Why would he want an end to the war? It only makes it easier for him to do what he wants to do and has wanted to do all along, very clear, conquer Ukraine and make the people of Ukraine kiss his ring. He, as the new czar in the Kremlin, must give up their system of political parties, their free press, their independence, their sovereignty.
Yeah, but it's a little bit
all of the above.
It's a little bit more complicated than that now, isn't it? Because of the mineral rights deal that we struck with Ukraine. I mean, now we have some tethering economically that we ostensibly would want to protect.
I would hope so, but how are we going to protect it if we should? I'm not saying we're going to, but if we should entirely abandon Ukraine at that point, Putin will say, "Listen, when I take these territories, you can do a deal with me over mineral rights. What's your problem? How are you going? Do you think you're going to defend your mineral rights if you're not even sending Patriot missiles to Ukraine? The Patriot missiles are defensive use to stop the bombing, the missiling, the droning of residential neighborhoods. And there were more than 300 drones hit parts of Ukraine over the last few days. So I don't see how that helps in that case. It was a good gesture. I think there's no question Zelensky thought great. We had a lot of economic relations. People like J.D. Vance suggested that was the case. I think I thought that was a worthwhile thing to do. But the But if Ukraine is abandoned, like our friends in Afghanistan were abandoned, like the Kurds have on occasion been abandoned, like the people of Hong Kong have been abandoned, like the people of Taiwan could be abandoned. Then it doesn't matter that there's some mineral deal on paper.
Well, then does it suggest that there is, short of entering the fray formally, there's not much that can be done to dissuade Putin? In other words, I mean, if we did provide Patriot missiles, or then does that materially change Putin's calculus?
It's actually quite simple. President Trump has said what he could do. He has said correctly that he could devastate the economy of Russia. My think tank, FDD, has a long memo exactly how that would be done, the kinds of sanctions that would be necessary. As it is right now, the price of oil and gas is not very high. It's not as high as he needs. The Russian economy is not in very good shape. Trump has correctly assessed. Strong sanctions and pressure on Putin economically, plus the continuation of supplying the necessary munitions to Ukraine. We don't have to pay for them. The Europeans can pay for them. The Middle Rights can pay for them. $300 billion frozen Russian assets in Europe can pay for them. All these things can pay for them. We just need to sell the Patriot missiles and also, I would argue, among other things, ATACMS, which are a wonderful American missile system. And unlike Biden, Trump should say these can be used against military targets in Russia, not just against Russian targets already in Ukraine. They're long-range missile, they can do it. At that point, Putin is going to say, I think he has to say, okay, let's have a ceasefire. And after all, under a ceasefire, everyone expects we will get to keep, maybe not under law, but keep 18% of Ukrainian territory he currently occupies. He can count that as an achievement. By the way, he needs to be pressured to do it because the ultra-nationalists in the country will not want to say, he doesn't want them to say, why did you give in? Trump is not putting any pressure on you. What was the problem? He has to say to them, look, the pressure is too much. We can't afford this economically. We can't afford it in other ways. We'll have to have a ceasefire. We'll figure out later how to take the rest of Ukraine. Maybe we have to wait till Trump's out of office and we get somebody more like somebody softer.
Well, with the imposition of those sanctions, oil and gas sanctions, theoretically, can we ensure that the Western Europeans don't cheat like they apparently have been? Or, I mean, I guess they're not technically sanctions, but I mean, they're taking. We understand they're taking shipments of oil and gas, with sort of
about 19% of
black
the
market.
It's not just black market. You're right. They haven't had enough oil and gas. It really helps that the U.S. is now exporting liquefied natural gas, that the U.S. is now utilizing its energy resources, and that there's a committee to make America dominant in terms of energy. The Europeans are, if anything, more hawkish right now than President Trump is. So, yes, the Europeans absolutely 100% need to be part of this. And I'm going to tell you, I think it's very clear they will. And yes, you can ensure that they're not cheating. There's all kinds of penalties. But for the most part, the Europeans are afraid that Trump is going to abandon Ukraine and abandon them in this war, the worst war in Europe since 1945. And yes, one of the things to do is the Europeans have to say no more gas or oil from Russia until there is a ceasefire. They have to do that. They can be. I don't think it takes a lot of arm twisting for that.
Well, speaking of a ceasefire, if there is a meeting at the Vatican with Pope Leo XIV, do you think Putin would show up?
That's a good question. I'm not sure that he would. He said he was going to show up, after all, in Turkey, and he didn't. I think he sent his culture minister. He's not serious about it. His demands are maximalist, which means he wants the surrender of Ukraine. He wants Ukraine to be what Chechnya is, a colony of Russia, or what Belarus is, a vassal state of Russia. Georgia has 2 provinces that were taken away from it in 2008. So we know what he wants. Without pressure, he doesn't back off from what he wants, because what he wants is not peace. He wants victory. He has lost. Trump is right. He has lost and is losing an enormous number of soldiers, and he thinks that's a sacrifice well worth making for the restoration of the Russian/Soviet empire.
What was your reaction to Trump's remarks in Saudi Arabia last week, specifically where he talked derisively about the nation builders and the neocons who got America extricated in other people's affairs, and better to leave the Arab world's affairs to the Arab world, and we'll focus on our own affairs, essentially. I mean, it was basically a restatement of America First, the America First philosophy.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's talking about nation building in this case. I don't think anybody's talking about nation building in regard to Taiwan or in regard to Iran's exterminationist ambitions vis-a-vis Israel, or North Korea's ambitions in terms of taking over South Korea. None of that constitutes nation building. We're not very good at nation building, but where nations are building themselves, look, I don't think you can plant democracy in arid soil. I do think you can support existing democracy. And the Ukrainians are an existing democracy. I mentioned this to you as before. I was there as an official election observer for their last elections. They had political parties and press. They were very, very proud of the fact that they were following election procedures to the letter. They don't want to give all that up. They're a fledgling democracy. South Korea was not such a fledgling democracy when we saved it from North Korea. As I mentioned in the past, the Korean War never ended in a path to peace. It ended in a truce, an armistice, a frozen conflict. This can end the same way, but there has to be two things. But two things have to happen. Pressure threatened by Trump has to come to pass. If Putin thinks he's bluffing, and he may think that now, he'll say, I'm going to call his bluff. But I got to tell you, if Putin calls his bluff, others will call his bluff too. And I'm thinking particularly Xi Jinping, who, again, wants to subjugate the Taiwanese. And I'm thinking of the Iranians. Trump has said very clearly that this jihadist regime will not get nuclear weapon capability under his watch. The negotiations there can lead to the right result, but only if the Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei thinks that America not only has the muscle to destroy their nuclear weapons program, but also is willing to use it if the result that Trump wants can't come about through negotiations.
Talking about the big guy, former President Biden, given the Robert, Don't Call Me Ben-Hur tape that came out on Friday, then the prostate cancer revelation, which clearly had been known for many moons, according to, I don't know, every urologist in America. And thinking about it from the national security team, the military perspective, we talked a bit about this with Stephen Bucci from Heritage yesterday. I thinking specifically about Milley and Austin and Blinken and the NSAs, the Susan Rices of the world that were part of the national security team. They knew or had to know something. So, how would you describe the conduct of participating in a cover-up as to the president's lack of capacity to make national security decisions? How would you describe that behavior?
I don't know, shameful,
criminal,
disgraceful,
criminal, treasonous. Does it rise to that level?
I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know if it's criminal, but it was a huge deception and kind of frightening, at least in retrospect. We don't really know who was running the country for quite a bit of time, I would say. And yes, the public had a right to know. I think that his doctor had an obligation to inform the public. it's a scandal, isn't it?
Do you think it's important that there be some sort of testimony that is subpoenaed, if necessary, from these parties that we're mentioning specifically and generally, to offer some sort of response to what we now know to be true and what they were party to in some material way?
I honestly don't know. From a national security perspective, I'm not sure that's necessary. I'm not opposed to it, but I think we all, at this point, we know what's going on. I also have to go add this as somebody who spent most of half his life in the news business. I just think this is a stain on a great deal of the media.
Yep.
Because reporters had to see what was going on, and if they did, they turned a blind eye, and they didn't tell their readers and their audiences what was right under their noses. And I probably, like you, went into the news business because I wanted to see the truth and tell the truth. And I spent a lot of time, as you know, I was a reporter, foreign correspondent, editor of the New York Times, among other places. In the days when the New York Times was a much better paper than it is now. It was just sort of an unspoken conspiracy by a lot of the press. I guess it was a herd mentality, and telling the truth in that news from when you walked out of the White House just wasn't allowed if you wanted to have beers with your colleagues that evening.
Cliff May, president of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies and foreign affairs columnist for the Washington Times. Cliff, thanks as always.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Before you see it on TV, share it on Facebook, or read about it in the paper. Hear it here first. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
We all hear the radio ads about the IRS. They tell you to be afraid, to be scared, and they try to frighten you into calling. I'm not here to do that. Tax Relief Advocates is different. TRA is here to tell you that if you owe money to the IRS, whether it's $5,000, $50,000, or $500,000, we have a solution. It doesn't matter if you're